very welcome back. Now, if you're looking to restore your faith in humanity, well, our next guest is your guy. In 2015, he started to reach out to the homeless in his city, offering them free haircuts. And from there, the Do Something for Nothing campaign was born, encouraging people to contribute their skills and time to those who need it. And he's not just a hairstylist, but a community hero and a movement maker. And this week, he's set to release his new book, aptly titled Do Something for Nothing. And we're delighted to say he joins us now on the line from London. Good morning, Joshua. How are you? Hi, Joshua.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
We're very good. Pleasure. And thank you for joining us. Tell us, you might take us back to 2015 and the start of this, what's now become a movement. What was the inspiration behind it, Joshua? And how did you get it moving?
For me, I think, the inspiration was a curiosity in me to wanting to know more about this issue. We see, I think, on a daily basis, whatever city that you live in, depending on where you live. I think we all know what it's like to walk past men and women who are experiencing homelessness and the feelings that confront us in that moment. What do we how do we interact with this as the general public? How do we better help? And for me, it was about listening to people's stories, and the haircut became this vehicle to be able to do that. So from working in a salon, I was able to, one day with my backpack, I had my things inside. I was on the way to a friend's house, and I got somebody a cup of tea, as I usually would, try and help or give somebody some pocket change. But I in that moment offered someone, a haircut, and actually it was perfect because it was a way of getting down their level, reaching out to them, listening to them, and of course a haircut's like a great way to be able to, fix someone up a bit and make them look and hopefully feel a bit better. But honestly, that connection and conversation was the most powerful thing from the beginning, and that's how Do Something for Nothing was born.
I was just going to say, because I think that's one of the things that everybody to a man and woman enjoys most about going to the hairdressers or the barbers is the conversation. Because as you can see, as we're watching those pictures, Joshua, when you engage with somebody and have that close personal contact, conversation follows. And I'm sure then you heard incredible stories about how people's circumstances changed to put them in the positions that they were in. It must have been very moving.
Yeah, it really is. And it's such an important point you brought up, because I think, when we give the time to listen, I think we all are interested in one another's stories and how we ended up in this moment when you meet someone, all the chapters of someone's life before you end up meeting a new person. But I think with homelessness, it's, we have to get past a lot of stigmas, I think, that I'm trying to do all the time with the men and women that I meet, because everybody I meet, it could happen to anybody. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but what I like to do is have a conversation, not just about the economic side of that some people can relate to being a paycheck away, but the psychological aspect of something happening in your life that might be painful, an event that you had no control over, that spirals you out of control. And that's when you really need a support network to try and help you out emotionally.
So you've met some fascinating characters. Initially, when I heard your story, Joshua, and I'm guessing I won't be alone, I assumed it was a COVID kind of practice. But as Simon said in the introduction, this is going back to 2015 when you kicked this off.
Yeah, exactly. I've tried to keep things going during the pandemic. This was 2015. I started doing this initially in London. As I said, I got out of my backpack and cut people's hair. But I worked a lot in America, the United States, in different cities there, across Europe, places like India and Mexico too. This thing doesn't discriminate. But what you do get is there's something that's always a constant for me, and it's really the focus of the book, and it's this human conversation I'm trying to have, which is when you go out there and you give your time to someone. Okay, you might be overwhelmed by all the problems that you see in the world, and I was initially too as well, and I still get that now, when you look at the statistics. But it's really important to reclaim the value as one person to be able to positively affect the life as another, yourself. And my version of that's a haircut, but other people's version of that might be very, very different.
But it seems to be restoring one of the things that people who are living on the streets, miss so much. And through a haircut you're doing in terms of you're returning a little bit of dignity to them, and that you can see that in that young lady's eyes when you're cutting her hair. She's moved to tears by it because it's almost reminding of her, probably her old self, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, the importance of a haircut or whatever that may be, it's important to identify as you and who you are. And we all know what it's like to wake up each day and have the things around us that make us feel like us. And I just think some of those privileges and being able to afford some of the luxuries that we might have to people who are really struggling right now. It may seem on the outside like a small thing. I'm very aware a haircut grows out in a few months, but the idea of, a lot less than that in some cases. But my point being that you're providing someone with a chance to give them some things outside of that circle of help that is just somewhere to sleep, trying to find the next meal. I think those are the things that make people feel more connected to themselves again. So I place a really high value on what might seem, perhaps not the first thing you'd think of helping someone from the outside.
But the haircut is basically a vehicle to a conversation and a connection. Yeah. Did you ever, when you were travelling, Joshua, was there ever any resistance to it? Were you in any difficult situations at any point?
It's not like life in general. It's not always easy. You have to keep your wits about you, and But for me, that's everywhere I go. Look, I found myself in different cities where I've been wandering around just me in sometimes quite difficult areas of town and quite impoverished areas of town. But it's interesting, because sometimes the outside can look that way, but it's about building trust with people and going back and going back again. And the relationships I've built with people from the outside might sometimes seem like a very different scenario than your own life, possibly. They're really beautiful. And once you build that trust, I think it's just about penetrating this this surface layer of, as I mentioned earlier, what is this issue? Because for me, in the book, there's some of the most beautiful humans that I've met. Different people, different faces, men and women, all different ages, that completely dissolve this idea of what we have around this issue. So yeah, I've never found myself in a difficult scenario that I wouldn't in life in general, anyway, outside of whether I was working with people who are living on the street or not.
I think the footage that we're seeing here, Joshua, is both sad and beautiful in equal measure. It's just so emotive to look at. The whole movement, and we have it on screen here, Do Something for Nothing, has become a movement in itself. It's a book. You also feature in a National Geographic documentary.
Yeah, that was the idea with the book is featuring different people through a haircut that you can then go on and read their story, and it can be really uplifting at times also. But it's more just a short piece on people's lives and how I've met them and what's happened. But the National Geographic was a really amazing thing. Morgan Freeman came and filmed something here where I live in South East London in Peckham, and that was an amazing way to get people's stories out there. Look, for me, this is all, Do Something for Nothing is an amazing way for other people to get involved with their skills, time. We've had yoga teachers going into rehabilitation centres. We've had young students going to have lunch with senior citizens who don't have any family. And just spending time with one another. I think we live in these communities where those relationships are really important. Yeah. And this is like just a reminder of that. We've always done this as people to kind of share and help one another, especially through times of crisis. And through this pandemic, I think it's very important to take some of those values to move forward in the future and interact in a better way.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, potentially one of the few things that we can take from the pandemic is that maybe it has done that, Joshua. It's made us look inwards and look at the people around us, and in terms of, well, what do they need and how can I help them?
Yeah, and I know that there's moments from this that it's been incredibly difficult for everyone, but I do feel that I know we all have a greater appreciation of those day-to-day people working really hard to help us out in this time. But I'd like to stretch that to greater appreciation and empathy for perhaps people who are the most vulnerable in our society and who need the same things as we do as far as connection, that basic human connection, And I'm just to finish that point, the isolation that we felt right now in this moment, we can all have this collective shared understanding of what it's like to be starved at these moments right now, and to be hoping and praying that we're going to be back out in the world and doing things normal soon. So in that and coming out slowly, it's like coming out of this time. I know that isolation exists with so many of the people that I meet on a day-to-day basis before the pandemic, and it will afterwards. I never point fingers or try and make people feel guilty. It's difficult to know what to do, but just recognize that having a conversation, giving your time, starting with a smile and how are you, it's sometimes the most important things to lead on to how to...
Well, listen, we really appreciate your time this morning, Josh. With the very best of luck with the book. Keep up the good work. It's an inspirational story, and we appreciate you coming on this morning.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
A pleasure. Joshua's book, Do Something for Nothing, is available now online and in all good bookshops nationwide.
Oh, what a lovely guy.
A gentleman.
Now, up next, we're back at the catwalk. Stay with us.